Chosen ones, this is not the first time God has warned you. This is not right before men. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a moment that was not arranged by coincidence, not guided by chance, and not placed in your life by accident. You are here because something within you knew that there was a message you were meant to hear, a message that would speak not only to your ears, but to the deepest part of your consciousness. Long before you pressed play, long before you chose this moment, something inside you was already responding. That is how divine awareness works. It moves ahead of time. It prepares the soul before the inner alarm was the voice of God. There is a moment every chosen soul remembers, even if they try to forget it, the moment when something inside whispered, "This is not right." No words were spoken. No evidence was required. There was simply a feeling that rose quietly from the depth of your being. That feeling was not confusion. It was not fear. It was not imagination. It was divine intelligence stirring inside your consciousness. Before any situation collapses, before any relationship breaks, before any door closes, God always speaks first through awareness. He does not argue with you. He does not threaten you. He simply makes something feel wrong. That feeling is sacred. It is the earliest warning system you will ever receive. And the tragedy is not that people don't hear it. The tragedy is that they feel it and then talk themselves out of it. You felt it when the conversation changed. You felt it when the energy shifted. You felt it when something that once felt alive suddenly felt heavy. That heaviness was not negativity, it was misalignment. Chosen ones, the moment something feels wrong within you, it is because it does not agree with who you are becoming. God does not warn you about where you are. He warns you about where you are headed. The inner alarm goes off when your present reality no longer matches your future identity. You were not overthinking. You were over-aware. The reason it felt uncomfortable to stay was because your consciousness had already moved forward. You had already outgrown the space, the person, the environment, the agreement, even though your physical world had not caught up yet. When awareness moves before circumstances, discomfort is created. That discomfort is not an attack, it is a signal. Every time you ignored that signal, life became more difficult. Not because God was angry, but because you were resisting alignment. When you go against what you know inside, you create friction between who you are and where you are. That friction manifests as anxiety, exhaustion, emotional instability, and spiritual heaviness. You did not lose peace because something bad happened. Something bad happened because you lost peace. Peace is the compass of the soul. Whenever peace disappears, it is because the direction is wrong. God never needs to shout when He can remove your peace. The moment something no longer feels right, it is already wrong, no matter how good it looks. You kept trying to fix what was never meant to continue. You kept negotiating with what your spirit had already rejected. You told yourself you were being dramatic, sensitive, unrealistic. But in truth, you were being honest with yourself for the first time. The inner alarm always comes before the outer collapse. That is why you sensed trouble long before it showed up. You felt the disconnect before the betrayal. You felt the emotional absence before the abandonment. You felt the deadness before the ending. That is not because you are psychic. It is because consciousness knows before experience does. Your inner world always moves first. God speaks through your intuition because intuition is your direct line to truth. It bypasses logic. It bypasses evidence. It goes straight to knowing. When something is not right before God, it is first not right within you. That is why your stomach tightened. That is why your heart felt uneasy. That is why you felt tired around certain people. Your body was responding to what your soul already knew. Energy does not lie. Words do. Appearances do. Situations do. But energy always tells the truth. When you feel uneasy, it is because something in your environment is not in agreement with your identity. You tried to silence that voice because it disrupted your plans. It challenged your comfort. It threatened what you were familiar with. But chosen ones are not designed to be comfortable. They are designed to be aligned. God will never warn you through fear. He will warn you through clarity. And clarity often feels like discomfort when you are attached to something that is no longer for you. The inner alarm is not negative. It is protective. It goes off when you are about to invest in something that will cost you your future. It activates when you are standing in a place that will delay your destiny. It stirs when you are about to settle for less than what you were created to command. You were never meant to beg for love. You were never meant to chase validation. You were never meant to tolerate disrespect. So when you did, your spirit rebelled. That rebellion was holy. You may have stayed longer than you should have, but you were never fully present. That is why things felt hollow. That is why you couldn't relax. That is why you kept thinking about leaving. Your consciousness had already gone ahead of you. And when consciousness leaves a place, that place begins to decay. The tension you felt was not about what was happening. It was about what was coming. You were being prepared to move into a new state of being, and the old reality could not come with you. So God sounded the alarm. You tried to normalize what was draining you. You tried to rationalize what was breaking you. You tried to survive in what was meant to be left behind. But your soul refused to pretend. The inner alarm is the voice of your true self calling you back to alignment. That is why it gets louder when you ignore it. That is why the discomfort grows when you stay. That is why nothing feels right even when everything looks fine. You are not depressed. You are displaced. Your spirit knows you don't belong there anymore. God is not removing things from your life. He is revealing what no longer matches you. And every time you felt that quiet, persistent knowing, this is not right, it was not doubt. It was divine guidance. You were being warned, not punished. You were being protected, not rejected. You were being redirected toward the version of you that already exists in consciousness. Because when God has something greater prepared for you, He first makes the old place feel uncomfortable, not to hurt you, but to move you. Repetition is proof you didn't listen the first time. There is a law quietly operating beneath everything you experience. Whatever you do not become conscious of will repeat itself. Life does not punish you, it mirrors you. And when God says, "This is not right before me," He does not always remove the situation immediately. Instead, He allows it to return in different forms until your awareness finally wakes up. That is why you kept meeting the same type of person in different bodies. That is why every new opportunity somehow led to the same disappointment. That is why no matter how much you changed the environment, the feeling stayed the same. You thought you were unlucky. You were actually unaligned. God does not send repetition to frustrate you. He sends it to teach you. Repetition is divine insistence. It is God saying, "Look again. You missed something." When something shows up again and again, it is because your consciousness has not yet moved to a new level. Chosen ones are not meant to suffer through cycles. They are meant to outgrow them. The pattern existed because a belief existed. The situation kept reappearing because the assumption behind it was still active. Every experience you have is shaped by what you accept as normal, what you believe you deserve, and what you assume is possible for you. So God kept showing you the same story with different actors until you realized you were the one holding the script. You didn't attract the same pain by accident. You invited it through agreement. Not a spoken agreement, an internal one. A quiet assumption that said, "This is just how it is for me." And life said, "So be it." That is why the warning came through repetition. Each loop was a message. You are still agreeing with something that is not true about you. When God says, "This is not right before me," He is saying, "This does not match who you are." And until you change who you believe you are, the outer world must reflect the old identity. You tried to change the people. You tried to change the places. You tried to change the strategy. But you didn't change the self-concept. So the story stayed the same. You left one relationship only to enter another with the same emotional absence. You left one job only to experience the same lack of recognition. You left one situation only to find the same feeling waiting for you in the next. Different scenery, same energy. That is not bad luck. That is consciousness repeating itself. God allows repetition not to trap you, but to wake you up. Every time you experience the same pain again, He is inviting you to finally see what you didn't see before. The cycle does not break through force. It breaks through awareness. The moment you see the pattern, it begins to dissolve. But awareness requires honesty. It requires you to stop blaming the outer world and start questioning the inner one. It requires you to ask, what am I believing about myself that makes this feel familiar? Because what feels familiar feels safe to the subconscious, even if it is painful. You were not staying in those situations because you loved them. You were staying because they matched what you believed about yourself. The mind does not seek happiness, it seeks consistency. So God repeated the lesson until you were finally ready to choose a new identity. Every cycle is a classroom, and you kept sitting in the same seat because you hadn't passed the test. The test was not about endurance. It was about self-worth. It was about truth. It was about alignment. The moment you finally say, "This is not who I am," the cycle loses its power. But until then, it must continue, not to punish you, but to reflect you. That is why the warning didn't stop. It grew louder. Each repetition was God saying, "I am still here. I am still trying to show you." You thought God was silent. He was speaking through patterns. And those patterns were not random. They were precise. They were tailored to your consciousness. They were designed to bring you face with the belief that was limiting you. The reason it hurt more each time is because you were getting closer to awakening. The discomfort increased because the old self was being challenged. When a belief is about to die, it resists. So the cycle intensified. You reached a point where you could no longer ignore it, where you could no longer pretend it was coincidence, where you could no longer blame fate. That is when the real warning arrived. Because when something keeps returning, it is not asking for patience. It is asking for transformation. God never removes a pattern until you remove the belief that created it. And the belief was not about them. It was about you. You believed love had to be painful. You believed success had to be hard. You believed you had to settle. So life said, "So be it." But now the repetition has done its job. You see it. You feel it. You recognize it. And recognition is the beginning of freedom. The moment you stop agreeing with the old story, a new one must appear. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Your soul rejected what your mind tried to justify. There was always a quiet conflict happening inside you. Your mind kept explaining why you should stay, why you should endure, why you should accept what did not feel right. But your soul was whispering something very different. It was not speaking in sentences. It was speaking in sensations, in heaviness, in exhaustion, in that dull ache you felt when you imagined continuing down the same path. That was not weakness. That was truth. The mind is trained to survive. The soul is designed to align. So when you found yourself justifying situations that made you feel smaller, drained, or invisible, it was because your mind was clinging to familiarity. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. The mind will always choose what it knows over what it deserves. But your soul does not operate that way. Your soul knows what you were created for. And when something does not match that knowing, it begins to reject it. That rejection is not loud. It does not create drama. It creates discomfort. You started feeling restless in places you once felt comfortable. You began feeling tired around people you once loved. You noticed that the excitement faded even though nothing obvious had changed. That was not because something went wrong. It was because something was no longer true. Your identity had shifted before your circumstances did. You were no longer the person who could tolerate being ignored, undervalued, or limited. But your mind had not caught up to that change yet. So it kept trying to rationalize what your soul had already outgrown. You told yourself, "It's not that bad," while your spirit was screaming, "This is not who you are." Chosen ones are often trapped not by situations, but by their own explanations. The more intelligent you are, the more convincing your justifications become. You can explain away disrespect. You can make excuses for neglect. You can normalize being unfulfilled. But you cannot fool your soul. The soul does not care how logical something sounds. It only cares whether it is true. And truth always feels light, even when it is difficult. Falsehood always feels heavy, even when it is comfortable. That is why you felt a weight on your chest when you tried to commit to things that were no longer aligned. That is why you felt anxious about a future that looked fine on paper, but felt wrong inside. Your soul was rejecting a timeline that did not belong to you. You were not afraid of losing what you had. You were afraid of losing yourself. So your soul pushed back. It did it through fatigue. It did it through emotional numbness. It did it through a loss of motivation. Not because you were broken, but because you were evolving. When God prepares to elevate you, He first changes how you feel about what you used to accept. The old life starts to feel uncomfortable. The old desires lose their appeal. The old compromises feel unbearable. That is not confusion. That is awakening. Your mind wanted stability. Your soul wanted alignment. So there was tension. You stayed in things that looked right but felt wrong. You held on to people who made sense but didn't bring peace. You chose logic over intuition. And every time you did, the discomfort grew stronger. That discomfort was not an enemy. It was a guardian. It was protecting the version of you that was being born. The mind says, "Don't rock the boat." The soul says, This boat is sinking. And when you finally stop justifying what drains you, everything begins to shift. You were never meant to negotiate your worth. You were never meant to prove your value. You were never meant to shrink to fit into spaces that were too small for your spirit. So when you tried, your soul resisted. That resistance is what led to the breakdowns. That resistance is what led to the endings. That resistance is what led to the divine disruptions. God allowed things to fall apart not because you failed, but because you were finally being honest with yourself. You could no longer pretend that what you had was enough. You could no longer silence the knowing that there was more for you. You could no longer betray your inner truth for outer comfort. Your soul was done pretending. And when the soul is done, nothing can save the old reality. That is why you felt pulled toward something you could not yet see. That is why you felt called to walk away, even when you didn't know where you were going. That is why you felt a strange mixture of fear and relief when things ended. Fear came from the mind losing control. Relief came from the soul being heard. Your mind wanted guarantees. Your soul wanted freedom. And God always sides with the soul. So when things fell apart, it was not because you were being punished. It was because you were being released. Released from agreements that were beneath you. Released from identities that were outdated. Released from futures that were too small. The mind may mourn what was lost. The soul celebrates what was saved. You were saved from a life that would have kept you disconnected from who you truly are. Now you understand why you couldn't stay, why you couldn't settle, why you couldn't keep pretending. Your soul had already moved on. And once the soul leaves a place, no amount of logic can make it feel like home again. Discomfort is God's way of forcing alignment. There comes a moment when what once felt tolerable becomes unbearable. The room feels smaller, the air feels heavier, conversations feel empty, even success feels hollow. That is not because something outside of you has gone wrong. It is because something inside of you has outgrown the space you are in. God does not always remove you from what is wrong. Sometimes He makes what is wrong so uncomfortable that you remove yourself. Discomfort is not punishment, it is pressure. And pressure is how alignment is restored. When you are in the wrong place, peace disappears first. Not money, not people, not opportunities. Peace. Because peace is the sole signal that you are in agreement with your true self. When you step out of alignment, peace fades even if everything else looks fine. That is why you could not relax. That is why you could not sleep deeply. That is why you felt restless even on good days. Your spirit was refusing to settle. You kept asking, why does this feel so hard? And God was answering, because this is not where you belong anymore. Chosen ones are not allowed to live in misalignment for long. You might be able to fake happiness. You might be able to smile. You might be able to perform. But your soul will not let you be comfortable in a place that will limit your destiny. So God turns up the discomfort. The joy fades. The excitement disappears. The emotional connection weakens. Not because something is broken, but because something is ending. You were never meant to stay in what drains you. But if comfort keeps you from moving, God removes the comfort. He does not destroy your life. He removes the illusion that you are okay. That is why things began to feel empty. You could not feel fulfilled by what once satisfied you. The old rewards stopped working. The old validations lost their power. You were no longer impressed by what once excited you. That is evolution. Your nervous system began rejecting what your mind was still attached to. Your body started reacting to environments that no longer matched your identity. You felt tired not because you were weak, but because you were forcing yourself to be someone you are no longer meant to be. Discomfort is what happens when the future is trying to pull you forward and the past is trying to hold you back. So you felt stuck, pulled, confused. But you were not confused, you were in transition. When God prepares to elevate you, He first makes the old level uncomfortable. He makes it impossible for you to feel at home in a place you have outgrown. The relationships that once felt exciting start to feel shallow. The goals that once felt meaningful start to feel small. The environment that once felt safe starts to feel restrictive. That is divine pressure. And pressure creates movement. If you stayed comfortable, you would never leave. So God removes comfort. You began to feel like you didn't fit anymore. That is because you didn't. You were carrying a new identity in an old environment. You were holding a future that could not exist in the past. Something had to give, so the discomfort intensified. You questioned everything. You lost motivation. You felt disconnected, not because you were lost, but because you were being relocated. You tried to fix the feeling by changing small things, a new routine, a new goal, a new distraction. But nothing worked because the discomfort was not about what you were doing. It was about who you were being. You could not stay the same and go where you were meant to go. So God created tension between your current life and your future self. And that tension felt like anxiety, dissatisfaction, frustration, and inner unrest. But that unrest was sacred. It was the call of alignment. Everything that was not meant to come with you started to feel heavy. People, habits, jobs, beliefs, they all began to drain you. Not because they were bad, but because they were outdated. You were carrying yesterday into tomorrow, and tomorrow was rejecting it. God uses discomfort the way gravity uses weight. It pulls you into the right place. That is why when you finally let go, there was relief, even though it was painful, even though it was scary, even though you didn't know what was next. You felt lighter because you stopped resisting where you were being led. Resistance creates suffering. Alignment creates peace. You were suffering because you were fighting your own evolution. Discomfort is the friction between who you were and who you are becoming. And once you understand that, you stop trying to numb it. You start listening to it. Because every time something feels unbearable, it is because it is no longer meant to be carried. God is not trying to hurt you. He is trying to move you. And He will keep turning up the pressure until you finally step into where you belong. Now you are being warned one last time. There comes a point in every chosen soul's journey when the warnings stop being subtle. The quiet inner nudges, the gentle discomforts, the soft feelings of unease, they give way to something stronger, something impossible to ignore. That moment is not meant to scare you. It is meant to save you. It is the moment when God says, without whispering, "This is your final chance to choose alignment." You were warned before through feelings. You were warned through repetition. You were warned through exhaustion. You were warned through emotional heaviness. But now the warning has become unmistakable. The doors that once stayed open are closing. The people you once leaned on feel distant. The places that once felt safe now feel empty. It feels as though life itself is pushing you forward. That is not abandonment, that is divine urgency. God only rushes you when delay would cost you your destiny. This is the stage where comfort disappears completely. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer adjust. You can no longer numb what you know. The old life will not work anymore, no matter how hard you try to make it fit. And that is intentional. Chosen ones are not allowed to remain in half-truths. When you reach this level of awareness, neutrality becomes impossible. You either align or you stagnate. You either step into the next version of yourself or you remain stuck in a story that has already ended. That is why the pressure feels intense now. The universe is not angry, it is focused. It is clearing a path. It is removing what would slow you down. You may feel like everything is being taken away, but in truth, only what no longer matches you is leaving. This final warning does not come with chaos. It comes with clarity. You suddenly see what you refused to see before. You recognize patterns instantly. You feel when something is off. You no longer need proof, your knowing is enough. You can feel when something is not aligned with your future, even if it still looks good in the present. That is the power of awakened consciousness. God is no longer trying to convince you. He is asking you to decide. The discomfort you feel now is different from before. It is sharper, more focused, more demanding. It does not allow you to stay distracted. It pulls your attention back to what matters. It forces you to confront what you have been avoiding. You are no longer being guided gently. You are being guided directly. This is the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. If you ignore this final warning, you do not stay where you are, you go backward. Because once awareness expands, pretending becomes suffering. You cannot unsee what you now know. You cannot go back to who you were without feeling trapped. That is why this moment feels so serious. Not because something bad is coming, but because something great is waiting. And you must let go of what would prevent you from receiving it. You are being asked to choose yourself. Not the version of you that is afraid. Not the version of you that settles. Not the version of you that survives. But the version of you that knows who you are. This final warning is not about loss. It is about alignment. Everything that feels unstable right now is only unstable because it is not coming with you. Everything that feels uncertain is only uncertain because you are stepping into something new. The old structures are breaking because they cannot support the life you are about to live. You are not being punished, you are being upgraded. And upgrades always require release. This is why you cannot stay quiet anymore. You cannot shrink. You cannot keep choosing what is familiar over what is true. You have been called to a higher state of being, and everything in your life is responding to that call. The resistance you feel is not from God. It is from the parts of you that are afraid to become more. But fear has no authority over your destiny. You are being asked to walk away from what no longer honors you, even if it is comfortable. You are being asked to step into what feels unfamiliar, even if it is uncertain. Because what is familiar was built by who you were, and what is waiting for you was built by who you are becoming. This final warning is an invitation to stop betraying your own knowing, an invitation to stop explaining away what your soul is rejecting, an invitation to step into the reality that already exists for you in consciousness. Everything you want is already prepared. Everything you desire is already waiting. But you cannot carry the old into the new. So if things feel intense right now, it is because the door is open. And you are standing at the threshold. The only thing left to do is walk through.